I want to just back up a little bit on some thoughts that we talked about. Memucan here, just to reiterate, nowhere in the text do we find God tell us that Memucan is just drunk and Memucan is slurring his words and he's just fallen over with drunkenness. He's simply answering before the king. That's all he's doing concerning this situation with Vashti. And let me just back up a little bit more and say this. It is a fact. Anyone who has been alive long enough to have a job, it is a fact to know that people do, especially people in the world, they do kiss up to the authorities. That's a thing. I don't think Memucan's doing this here. People that kiss up to authority, they're really not concerned with giving whoever the authority is the truth. They're more concerned with just securing favor with the boss or the teacher or whoever's in charge. And that is a problem. I don't think that problem's going on here, but people that act that way, they're telling the authority what they want to hear in hopes to get a promotion or to get a raise or to earn some type of favor. And when that happens in a business, when it happens in any group situation, it doesn't help. You essentially end up deceiving whoever the leader or the authority is because you won't tell that king or that boss or that authority, you just won't tell them the truth about what you see the matter to be. Pilgrim family, may I say to you, we can't go down that road. We have to be upfront and straight with each other and tell each other the truth for the sake of the truth. I don't want to mislead anybody by withholding advice that could cause them to stumble or go down a road that they shouldn't. It's why the Bible says in Proverbs, there is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. I don't think anybody in this room, adults, maybe kids, but I don't think any adults in this room went ahead and did something thinking, yeah, this is really going to hurt me and my family. I mean, nobody does that. You think in your mind, man, this is right, this seems right, let's go ahead and... So we need to be careful on how we advise and counsel people for that reason. But I don't think Memucan is caught in the trap of flattery. I don't think he's in bondage to being a yes man to the king. Let's go on. In verse number 17, it says, "For this deed of the queen shall come abroad unto all women, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. When it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not." So this deed of the queen, this infection is going to spread. And Vashti's example is now going to influence the other women. And ladies, you probably, the ladies in this room probably already understand this principle. You have a lot of influence. And you can use it for God or you can use it for self. But you do have influence. And although men in a local church setting are called to be the leaders, it's not like the women aren't influencing the leaders. What pastor doesn't go home and talk to his wife about things? What trustee or deacon or what bishop or elder doesn't talk to his wife about the things that are going on in the church? We all do that. So ladies, you have influence and you really do control the spirit of the church, for lack of a better word, or the attitude of the church more than you know. More than you know. So everybody's concerned now about Vashti because of the influence she's going to have with the rest of the ladies in the provinces. And it says, so that they shall despise their husbands in their eyes. Well, if Vashti can tell the king, who's the highest authority, I'm not listening to you, and the other ladies get wind of it, they're going to be emboldened to tell the king of their home, the lord of their home, the master of their home, the head of their home, you can go pound sand too. And this is a concern. Why? Because influence is a thing. It matters. And so the queen, when she refuses to be in subjection to the king, she's just verbally and in her heart saying, I'm just not going to yield to you, king. And ladies, that'd be an awful place for you to be. You come home, or your husband comes home, and your heart, you're not saying it verbally, it's just in your heart. I'm just not going to yield to you. And when a so-called Christian lady, or a Christian lady who is genuinely saved and really is saved, refuses to yield to her husband's authority, it's really hard for me to believe that she would be in any way yielding to the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit would cause her to yield to her husband. Putting aside physical abuse and all, put that on a side, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about regular, everyday situations. And this is recognized here in Esther chapter number 1. Verse number 17, it goes on, it says, at the end of the verse, look at it says, when it shall be reported, the king Ahasuerus commanded Vashti the queen to be brought in before him, but she came not. You come home from work, gentlemen, and you ask your wife, what's for dinner? And she says, why don't you just go make your own dinner? That's what's going on here with the king and the queen. And before you know it, Vashti is going to get all the ladies to thumb their nose at their man, just like she did. Can you take the kids to piano lessons? How about you take them, old man? Imagine that. You're going to have the whole town following Vashti's influence. I mean, she's the most powerful, wealthiest, most recognized woman figure in all the provinces. And she carries a lot of influence. And this, it's an infection that can be caught easily by other women who then are going to despise their husbands. And you can see in verse number 12, but the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by his chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. And so Vashti is thinking, I'm not letting him tell me what to do. The king's not ordering me around. And look at verse number 13. It says, Then the king said to the wise men, which knew the times. Now, I know we parked on the times, that phrase, last Thursday. But I'm going to say to you, I'm going to make a practical application for tonight. We do need some wise men in our day who are up with the times, and they know the times. They know currently what is going on. And when you know that there is some bad influence going on, or you know there's a rub going on, you have to be able to say something. Do something. Talk about it. Take action. And this is what happens. Look at verse 15. They are doing something. It says, what shall we do unto the queen Vashti according to the law, because she hath not performed the commandment of the king Ahasuerus by the chamberlains. So, you have to change the context in Esther, because there may be some leaders in the church, or there may be some Christian men who are afraid to go home and face their wives because of exactly what's going on with the king and the queen. So it's easier to change the context of Esther to make it about, the context in Esther 1 to make it about Vashti. She just had a right to do this. And if you can make it that Vashti had a right to do this because of all the stuff we talked about in the last few sermons, then it doesn't seem like such an offense for a woman to disrespect her husband in a public setting. Does that make sense? Look, Vashti just had a right, just leave her alone. But Vashti is about to cause an uprising of women who are despising God's social order. Look at verse number 18. Likewise shall the ladies of Persia and Media say this day unto all the king's princes which have heard of the deed of the queen, thus shall there arise too much contempt and wrath. And so she refused the king in verse number 12, and we read now how the king he's very raw. And when this goes unchecked, what continues to grow, do you think, in the palace? More anger of the king. So what helps our society, what helps our homes, what helps our churches is honestly women who are not in contempt with their husbands. That helps a society. This is why Ephesians 5 talks about the wives should reverence their husbands. It honestly, in every man, the worst thing, the thing that men despise the most, ladies, is to be disrespected. They hate that. And the king feels disrespected, and so men, just like our temperature would rise when we felt disrespected by our spouse, King Ahasuerus is getting a few degrees hotter. And society and families grow when wives have proper respect toward their own husbands. And you can't have a generation of faithfulness without that, because mamas will be teaching their daughters, look, when you grow up and get married, you tell off your old man too. And that's not right. The psalmist said, remove from me reproach and contempt. Just get it out of my heart. Get it away from me. Look at verse 19. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered, that Vashti come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both to great and small. All the wives giving their husbands honor. Now, I like that. But the wives have to like that. And we have a heathen king who has heathen advisors, and they understand a biblical principle that women shouldn't rule the house and women shouldn't rule the kingdom. And this type of despising is contempt toward the king. And so what happens is Vashti is not only dishonoring her husband, Vashti is dishonoring her home. Vashti is now going to spread that dishonor to other homes. And the last thing we want for practical application in church life is for women to persuade other women in the church to despise the order of God. God has an order. So Vashti sets herself against God's order, and heathen people know in their heart, man, this ain't right, and they're willing to do something about it. And the odd thing about the whole thing is this: Vashti is willing to lose everything. It's like, man, you just go so far to just show contempt. Go to Isaiah 3. Let's look at some cross references. Isaiah 3 and verse 11. Isaiah 3, verse 11. Bible says, "Woe unto the wicked, it shall be ill with him, for the reward of his hands shall be given him. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths." I'm sure that verse is familiar. It's fitting for the context tonight. If the woman rules, and the woman rules the man, that means the woman rules the home. And if the woman rules the home, whatever church the family goes to, the woman will be ruling in the church. And she's going to influence other women to rule her home the way that she wants to. And said all that to say, that's why we have women preachers today. They despise the order of God, and they don't want to come under the subjection or under the authority ultimately of God. Now, I've heard some horror stories of some horrible men that have done wicked things. They shouldn't have wives or homes. It's almost like some of these guys get a wife or have a family just so that they can have their little kingdom to control. Man, that's a problem. That's not what we're talking about here, though. We're talking about men who need to be able to lead and rule. Or if our country ends up having you know how close we were to having a woman rule over us? That is not a biblical principle. Well, what if it's a Republican? It's still not a biblical principle. The men are supposed to lead because you can't have a soft, feminine touch on everything. Ladies, there is an absolute spot for that, but not for everything. Not for war. Sometimes you just need a forceful stop button. And God has designed men to have that forceful stop button on some situations. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. So Isaiah, the Old Testament confirms that we have heathen kings, a heathen king getting advice from heathen advisors, and it lines up with an Old Testament principle. That's pretty good. Look at verse number 21 in Esther, chapter number 1. Bible says, "And the saying pleased the king and the princes." So there you go. "And the king did according to the word of Memucan." Good old Memucan. The word of Memucan lined up with Isaiah. He understood that the authority of the king is in question now. It's not going to be good for anybody. Go to 1 Corinthians 11. We'll look at the New Testament. 1 Corinthians 11, verse number 3. Bible says, "But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God." So there's an order that God has ordained. And ladies, this is not a bad thing. The head of the woman is the man. So ladies, your husband is your head. That's not something weird. It's something right. It's biblical. And you should be thankful that you have a head that is wanting to follow God. So what we see in Esther 1, the advice given isn't in contradiction to the New Testament either. Look at verse number 8 in 1 Corinthians 11. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. Now, I like that verse, and sometimes I like that verse for selfish reasons, and that's wrong. And we go to the Bible sometimes, and we take a Bible verse, and we can wrest it to our own destruction. Yeah, you just do what I tell you to do type thing. Well, that's not a heart that's after God. But God knows something about man that man doesn't know, that we need a helpmeet. I'd probably guess that the ladies in this room, if they had unlimited money, they would probably do better off alone than us men if we had unlimited money. Money aside, ladies could probably do better alone. But it's like when God made Adam, he knew he needed some help. He's lonely. The big part of the help that Adam got was, I don't have to hang out with the giraffes anymore and feel lonely. I have a companion that completed him, that helped him. And both men and women should embrace those roles. And the word of Memucan lines up with 1 Corinthians chapter number 11. Men need women. We do. And so the king's angry, he's not respected, and so we know that. Go to 1 Timothy 3 and we'll show one more New Testament verse. We won't stay there long. Already went through 1 Timothy. But chapter number 3, we see qualifications for bishops and deacons. And look at verse number 4. It says, one that ruleth well his own house. Church leadership, it needs to be a man that rules well his own house. We understand that. Look at verse number 5. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God? Well, the answer to the question is he wouldn't. So the words of Memucan are lining up with the qualifications for New Testament leaders in a church. Now, the king is a leader of the kingdom. So now, not only is he embarrassed, not only is he disrespected, but he doesn't want the people to see a weakness that he's not qualified. People in their hearts know, man, the queen's not even following the king. We don't respect this guy. So it becomes a bigger issue because of this going on. You don't have to turn there, but Genesis 3, it says, unto the woman God said, and thy desire shall be to thy husband. Now, I hope all the ladies here would be okay with that. I mean, Vashti isn't desiring the king. I don't want nothing to do with you, buddy. Ladies, you should have a desire to your husband. It should be a heartfelt desire. And then Genesis 3 goes on to say, and he shall rule over thee. Now that's part of the curse. And because Adam and Eve sinned, this is what God said to the women. I think the words of Memucan line up with Genesis 3. I think that's pretty clear. And the advice that he's getting is biblical advice on how a home, how a church, how a kingdom, how fill in the blank should be run. They say marriage is like a deck of cards. In the beginning, all you need is 2 hearts and a diamond. By the end, you wish you had a club and a spade. Now, We can laugh about that because we've got good homes. But there's a lot of fellas that, they take that thing literal right there. A man is either going to rule his home or a man is going to ruin his home. He's going to do one of the two. And ladies, if you try to rule him, he will end up ruining his own home. He'll ruin it by either leaving, like just really leaving, walking out, he's done, or leaving emotionally where he's just not involved, not around. He's got, hunting trip, fishing trip, out in the woods. He'll just figure out a way to go play Rambo for, every weekend out of the year because he's going to find a way. And he'll ruin his home by doing that. Or he'll stay, and it's like, you get a new puppy, and it's just, the pup walks around the house with his tail tucked between his legs because he's afraid, and he's just whipped. He's a whipped pup. And that ruins the home too. There's no male authority. There's no male leadership. There's not a man in the home to be able to say, no. We can stop a lot of teenage pregnancies across our nation if fathers were in the homes, involved, having not a feminine touch, a forceful hand. No, we're not doing that. And having an affectionate care, spending time with their daughters, doing fun things, showing some interest in them, just killing time with them. And we would solve a lot of teenage rebellion. But it's just out of order. I wrote down these two thoughts when I'm going through the end of Esther. Before Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac, do you think he went to Sarah and said, honey, do you really think this is a good idea? No. The Bible says he got up early, he saddled his ass, he got some wood, and he grabbed his son Isaac, and he went and did what God told him to do. Now, how would that settle with you, ladies, if you were married to Abraham? I'm just saying there's some things that men have to do. When God tells a man to do something, he better be prepared to do it. Before Joshua he gathers all the elders of Israel, all the leaders of Israel together, and he says, and so before he gathers them together, do you think he took his wife and said, honey, I'm going to gather all these leaders. Do you think I should tell them not to go after other gods? Do you think I should tell them, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord? I don't think he did. He gathered those fellows and said, look, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. He spoke as a man for his wife, for his family. He did what God told him to do. Men, that's what we need to do. We need to lead that way. We need to speak with authority as the rulers of our home. The culture doesn't want to hear that. And look at verse 22. We'll finish in verse 22 in Esther. Say a couple things about this verse. So verse 21, the saying pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. So he had some pull with the king, good advice. And it's in verse 22, for he sent letters into the king's provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language, that every man should bear rule in his own house, and that it should be published according to the language of every people. They didn't want to miss it. We'll print this thing in multiple languages. We want to get this message out. Men need to rule their homes. Ladies, don't read this verse and think that this is a verse that's hard on women. Think about this. This is a verse that's hard on the men. Well, no man's going to rule over me. No. I know the ladies here aren't thinking that. But a lot of ladies think like that. No man's telling me what to do. Matter of fact, if I get an opportunity, I'll tell them off just like Vashti told the king off. ladies at Pilgrim aren't thinking like that. But ladies, when you read this verse, this is a hard verse for men, because if you are a helpmeet to your husband, he is your head, you are to be in subjection to him. So when I read a verse like this in Esther chapter 1, verse 22, I'm thinking, man, Lord, this is tough, because I want to follow God. And if my wife is to be my helpmeet, and I don't want her to feel like an inadequate helpmeet. Well, how can she feel like an inadequate helpmeet? I think all ladies struggle with inadequacy. I think all saved people struggle with inadequacy. She would feel inadequate as a helpmeet if she has to be subjected or in subjection to a husband who isn't following the Lord. She has to help him, yet she wants to honor God. Guys, this is a tough verse for us. Because as we follow the Lord as we should in all things, in everything, all day, by default, our wives are following the Lord as they help us. It's a tough verse for men to get a hold of. And we shouldn't take our role as leaders, as the head, lightly. Make it easy for them, so she can know for sure that she is the helpmeet that God would have her to be. So if you're a prince, be a prince. If you're a lord, be a lord. If you're a master of your house, be a master. Whatever's going on here in all these provinces, the king is sending a letter out. Fellas, you need to step up and be the man of your house. And that's how Esther 1, chapter 1 will end. Next week, Lord willing, we'll get into chapter number 2. All right, let's pray.